Today, I will refute against the claim about free tuition public schools. The advocate's main claim was tuition-free public university has positive impact on students. She had three subclaims. Her first subclaim was tuition-free works in foreign countries. Second, tuition-free will not limit students' decision in their education. And lastly, tuition-free will encourage students to go to school. The advocate's first claim was that tuition-free works in foreign countries. She had two secondary claims, which was students pay a small amount of fees and students receive a higher education for a much smaller cost than other schools. However, tuition-free countries has a few drawbacks and lesser education, leading to students being less successful. Students may have free tuition, but students will have to pay for dorming, and not all students get to dorm. For example, an article about France dorming costs and financing is about 600 euros a month, or $680 is needed to pay for the dorm, and books and other necessities aren't even included. On the other hand, living outside the dorm, an average college student in France would spend about 1,200 euros, or about $1,400, which is about 11,200 per year. That itself is almost double than the average tuition year in Pomona. Also, education in tuition-free college is less education than paid education here in the United States. In a research conducted by Business Insider, the professor-student ratio is much higher in tuition-free universities because there are less classes that are available and way more students than the class should have. Each class have at least 50 students with one professor. That's more than half the average professors we have here. The workload for the students will be less due to the professor making it easier for himself to grade 50 or more students. The second claim the advocate had was tuition-free will not limit students' decision in their college education. Her claim itself has major flaws. Since students will not be limited on their decisions, students will end up changing majors over and over again and dropping with a W. In another article by Business Insider, a tuition-free country such as Denmark has a saying, the saying, which directly translates to eternity students, which refers to students changing their major year after year. Also, in an article by Norris Incorporated, currently most colleges charge tuition when a student repeats a course. Let's talk for a minute about the dynamics on a college campus. When faced with challenging and rigorous classes, some students will realize they're in danger they are in danger of failing and play the W card, as in withdrawing from the class. Depending on the grading system at the college university, a W grade may not factor into the grade point average calculation, but withdrawing from a class has financial ramification. Once tuition becomes free, abuse of withdrawing from classes will increase. After all, the financial incentive to finish what you start has been removed. The advocate's last claim was that tuition-free will encourage students to go to school. Her subclaims were how low-income students will be encouraged to attend school, enrollment and graduation rates increasing. However, low-income students have parents that push them to do better in school because they want their kids to succeed, and an article by Study Breaks explains how low-income students work harder than kids whose parents paid for all the tuition because they don't have to worry about paying it back or helping their parents out. Also, the increase of enrollment and graduation rates will happen if the tuition is free, but the process would be much longer. Average students who graduate their first 4 years mostly have to wait 1 to 3 years to get into a graduate school. Having more students will lead to a longer wait time for students, and students will have to waste more time in their life. All in all, tuition-free college has too many drawbacks that will lead to an unsuccessful time for students. Thank you.
Okay, structurally, everything's easy to follow. On the first point, you basically suggest that there's still going to be substantial costs. It primarily comes from having to secure housing, and you use the dorming example as an illustration. If you're lucky enough to get into the dorm, here's what the price is going to be. If you're not able to get in the dorm, here's what the price is going to be, and you show how that price would actually be twice the tuition that would be paid by students at Cal Poly. I think that's a pretty good answer on that argument, although there probably are additional costs paid by Cal Poly students that would fit in this category as well. I don't know what the ultimate comparison would be, but it does sound to me like there is some information here that suggests that students are not going to school for free. They still have to pay for other things, and that what they're paying is a substantial amount of money. So I think that's a reasonable argument to be making there. The ratio of students to teachers, I think that's an interesting point. If you could demonstrate, for instance, that there is a substantial impact on students' achievement or accomplishment or the learning because of that, that would make that point even stronger. I'm sure that everybody in here, I'm sure, has probably taken a class where, have you been in one of those math classes where there are 100 students and you're just doing two tests, and do you even do a paper in a class like that? No, that kind of thing. So we get some of that kind of stuff going on in here. Is it effective? Is it producing kinds of results? If it's that way more in these other countries, then we should be able to see some data on that. You're kind of making the assumption that there's a difference there, and I think it's probably a sound assumption, but it would be better if you had some data to support it. The argument about not having any limitations, I think that you had an interesting point there with the phrase. I should be able to say that. Once I realized what it was, I figured out it's the eternal. What's the phrase you used? The eternity student. I thought it was like the eternal student, is the kind of. I took German. This is not German, but it's like Dutch or Danish or something like that. But it's close, and I'm going the continuing student. When you mentioned graduate school, I was thinking the term that I used to use was gradual student. They're not a graduate student, they're a gradual student. They're taking 8 years to get through their undergraduate degree, that kind of thing. But yeah, exactly, that people, they could change their majors, there's no economic consequence to them in regard to those sorts of things. Whereas here, if you withdraw from a class, okay, you get a W, but you also lose all the monetary investment that you made, and in other places you don't lose that, and so there's not as much incentive to stay on the ball, stay focused, and get done. Again, this would be a good place where there was some evidence that talked about how rapidly people complete their degrees in these countries that have the free tuition kind of thing, how successful they are, and you could compare it, for instance, here. Although, maybe we're not a good comparison, because I think I saw a statistic that says that the average student here takes 6 years to get their undergraduate degree, if it's 8 years in these countries, then that's a good comparison. But if it's 5.5, then we're screwed by the comparison. I don't know what the comparison is going to be. I wasn't quite clear where you were going with this low-income student argument at the end. It's not clear what inference you want me to draw from that. I think that's a little bit problematic. So having made the argument, you need to explain what it means. Okay.